it's more cyclical because you have to figure out what your core brand elements are before you really figure out what the target audience is, but they have to bounce off of each other. So you have to keep doing some quick checks and balances back and forth with your brand purpose, with your brand pillars, and with the target audience. And
hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Powerful Impact. I'm your host, Shay Wheat, founder of Grace and Ease Productions, where we support entrepreneurs just like you with event-based marketing and sales strategies, allowing you to build your authority, your credibility, and your visibility in your industry. Now, I've got a question for you before we dive into today's guest. Do you ever struggle just trying to define a clear and compelling brand message? You know, the thing that's really, it's challenging for customers to maybe understand you or your values and what you can do for them. Well, our guest today is Laura Bull, who specializes in transforming people into competitive and sustainable business brands. Now, y'all, she spent 10 years with Sony Music Entertainment, becoming one of the company's youngest executives at the age of 28, marketing for globally recognized brands like, maybe you've heard of Carrie Underwood, Brad Paisley, Johnny Cash, and now her best-selling book, From Individual to Empire, a guide to building an authentic and powerful brand, supports her goal to help creatives understand themselves deeply as a brand in order to connect with consumers and build long-term businesses. So please help me welcome Laura to the Creating Powerful Impact stage. How are you?
hi, thanks for having me. That was amazing.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think it's fascinating because, you know, we both support essentially a very similar audience, like visionaries and creatives, and they want to get their message out into the world. And how in the world do they do that? You know, I think you're kind of more the forefront of it, and I'm more of the back end of it. So that's why I'm really excited to have you on with us today because, you know, personal branding, traditional branding, like, it's all kind of buzzwords, in my opinion. I would love for you to maybe explain your perspective on it and why in the world is it even important for them to think about it?
Oh my gosh, it's everything. But it's funny that you say that it's buzzwords because it really is. I've been personal branding people since the 90s, so giving away my age there. But it's really, I call it influencer branding too. So it's you're trying to influence an audience with you as the product. You are the product. Think about all the different jobs these days that are available to us because of the internet, because as us being the product, right?
Mhm.
So that's authors, thought leaders, podcasters, real estate agents. It's really running the gambit. The PTO moms, right? Anybody who's trying to influence any size audience. So it can be a small local audience, it could be a huge audience. It also doesn't necessarily have to have social media behind it. So there's all kinds of communication channels out there available to us. Social media is just one aspect of it. So I always use George Clooney as an example. He's literally out there changing the world, but he doesn't have social media. So it's all about trying to figure out what my personal brand identity is, but then transforming that into a business brand. So how do you become a Nike swoosh? How do you become a foundation of a business that's going to be there for the next 20 years, right? And
Mhm.
how do you build revenue streams around that? Because there's also influencers out there with millions of followers that don't have a business behind it and don't
Yes.
have products and services. So you may think that they're millionaires or super successful business owners, but they may not necessarily be because maybe it's not connecting in the way that it should be connecting. So
Yeah.
there's all these different elements that come into play when you're dealing with a person.
So, okay, you've thrown the word out there, influencers.
Yes,
And some of them are more influential than others. But
right.
how do they actually gain the influence? Like, how do they gain that power and support and backing that makes it an influencer?
Okay, so there's a couple things here too. So first off, I do not believe in the it factor. I've worked with thousands of artists, my background being in the music industry, and now outside of the industry, I've worked with a lot of people from acting to a lot of celebrities all over the place, from national icons to cookie dough companies, whatever that looks like. But there is no such thing as the it factor. Think about the 5 Minute Tonight Show couch, right? If somebody is on that couch, they are connecting with an audience, they have 5 minutes, right, to explain who they are. People make their decisions on brands that they trust and brands that they connect with within nanoseconds. So this is image. It's not just what they're saying on that couch. It's image, it's narrative, it's what they're providing to the audience, right? All three of those things, as clear as day, they have to be consistent, clear, and communicated within nanoseconds. That is the it factor. And so the people that are confident in what that looks like, they're the ones that are going to be the superstars. And the other thing that is necessary for people to connect with is what is shared values. And so it's actually a principle of influence. It's been around for decades, but shared values are something that a lot of people overlook. And if you can identify a shared value that you have with your target audience, that is what is going to create advocates for your brand. That is what's going to create the word of mouth. Those are the ones that are going to really connect at a deeper level with what you're saying overall. So kind of two different answers there in one.
Yeah, for sure. So you were kind of mentioning like your target audience.
Yes.
For those that are listening and like, okay, yeah, I've got a target audience, but I don't know if it's really super clear. And I keep trying a little bit of this, a little bit of that to, find that message. How would you support somebody that's kind of in that situation going, this is really how you like dial it in and can speak to, the pain points or speak to their language? Like, how does someone get started in that space, even if they've been in business for a while?
Yeah, and figure out that shared value, because
Yeah.
a lot of times people just don't even realize what that is. So it's kind of cyclical. Like when I'm putting together a brand report for somebody, we start with what the target audience is potentially, like the hypothesis of, right? And we look at the elements of the brand that would connect with what audience, right? So, but because we're dealing with people, it's different. So if I'm trying to brand the traditional branding of trying to brand like a product, so a Jeep, right? I would be in a boardroom with a bunch of people and we would decide what personality to put on that Jeep in order to sell to the target audience that we have determined, right? So it's outdoorsy, it's rugged, it's adventurous, it's fun. These are the elements that we have decided to place on this object because of the target audience that we want to hit, right? When you're a person, you don't have that luxury because you already have a personality and you already have a life of experience and priorities and values, and your life is going to shift, as you evolve, as everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more cyclical because you have to figure out what your core brand elements are before you really figure out what the target audience is, but they have to bounce off of each other. So you have to keep doing some quick checks and balances back and forth with your brand purpose, with your brand pillars, and with the target audience and the shared values, just to make sure that it's all in line once you're done.
What maybe share an example of somebody that you've worked with that you've kind of like uncovered some of these core things for them, or offer some suggestions on how to come about what those could be.
So I'm just trying to think real quick. I have a lot of NDAs, so I'm trying to
I
think.
can only imagine, considering
Yeah,
you've got, some pretty high profile peeps.
Well, so I'm trying to give a good example using a pop culture reference because that's going to be safe space.
Or even if you were just to say, let's say a business coach or, somebody like that, what would you, if you had a business
So
coach in front of you?
everybody typically comes in with a idea of what their target audience is, right? So like that's why I always say it's a hypothesis. So we kind of culminate what that looks like. Then we try to figure out from a psychology level, is that audience going to connect with? But at the same time, we're over here doing an audit phase where we are trying to pull out all of the key characteristics of who this person is and will be for the next 20 years, right? No matter what changes in their life. So when I'm doing an audit on somebody, I'm looking back to their childhood and I'm looking 20 years in the future. So it is a very extensive process where we are looking at I've literally guessed what a client drove based off of the information that I pull in my questionnaires with my clients. I literally was able, just based off of what I knew to be her lifestyle, her personality, her priorities and values and everything, I was able to pinpoint what kind of car she drove. So we really find everything about them. And then we have all these elements, let's say 10 different elements that could be this brand. But if you're a Nike swoosh, that's way too many elements, right? And that's what trips a lot of people up because they're like, oh, well, I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. And I don't know how to narrow this down into something that can stand the test of time, right? And connect. So we have the target audience over here. We have a bunch of elements over here. Then we look back and try to connect the two. Okay, well, which ones of these are going to connect with this? Well, this is really important to this person. This element right here, we can't. So maybe that has to change something in the target audience because this element has to stay. And that could change a segment over here, right? So that's what I mean by it kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah, so it's like if trust was a big thing for you,
Right.
you would then utilize that in communicating to the target audience.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, once we figure out what elements will communicate the most effectively to this audience, then those become the brand pillars. And when we're looking at brand pillars, I always say it's the grouping together. These elements have to stay together. So for instance, if I were to say, oh my gosh, there's this powerhouse vocalist female, and I cannot remember her name. Who could that be? Right. And then the answers back are, okay, well, that could be Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey or Carrie Underwood. That could be so many different people. But then when I'm saying, okay, and I'm looking back at that group of elements that make this person, I say, no, she has this mod quality. She's British. She has this mod quality to her. Like the cat eye and all of that stuff. Okay, now who is it? Well, it's Adele. So we've narrowed down the marketplace because those two elements were together. So what we're looking for are the 4 to 5 elements that will always be together in every image, every narrative, and every product service provided.
And then would it also be conducive, like you were saying, you could figure out like what kind of car they drove. And if that then also resonates with your target audience, then it would make sense to include that in some of your marketing as well.
Well, it could be. It just depends on what your purpose is too, because your purpose is going to fall in line. So if the kind of car this specific person that I chose, it would not make sense. Okay, it opens up an idea for a potential partnership, right?
Yeah.
Because it's in line with her as a person, right? But she was a TV reporter. So I don't know if, doing something like a car line or something would make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I immediately think about what type of products you could put out, but she was looking at a couple other products. So we came up with a couple of different product revenue sources that she could do that would be on brand. But yes, everything that is authentic to the person, you can open up some type of partnership with, because when you're looking at partnerships and you're a person, it's no longer, you shouldn't look at it as like an endorsement of. You need to look at it as a partnership. Two brands coming together, not just you partnering with a brand, right? So the brands have to align, and I've actually done some research on this, and I do have it in my book of transference in marketing and advertising is the two brands that are together are going to be transferred. Their brand elements and their brand messaging is going to transfer onto the other one if they're in the same vicinity, right?
Yeah.
A lack of, I could have probably said that a better way, but so like when you're talking about Nike and how they partner with so many people, they have to cut and run real fast when a celebrity brand goes bad that they have partnered with, because they don't want it to come back on them. Another example is the Gap partnered with Sarah Jessica Parker at the height of Sex and the City, and it actually hurt their sales. The Gap sales went down because what was her brand at the time? She was so known for being the fashionista, the high end, right? She's not wearing khakis to Upper East Side party, right? So that campaign ended. She's actually since then done another one, but it's been a long time, right? That Sex and the City has diminished in her own brand. So, but it made more sense for her to do the shoe line with the heels because of the fashion icon status that she had built for herself,
right?
Sex and the City character.
Yeah. So for those that are they've got their personal brand and then there's like the company that they're growing. How do they work together? Do you keep them separate? Do they, lay it on top of each other? How does that work?
It depends. It totally depends on the company, on what there is to begin with. So like for Sarah Jessica Parker, right? She already was an actor, and then she decided to build product line extensions, basically, is how I look at that when you're doing that. But if you also take somebody like a Bethany Frankel, she created Skinny Girl. So Skinny Girl is the bigger brand there, and she's the face of. But there's also times where I work with people who just have an idea and a vision for a company, but so much of themselves is going into that company that we use their personal brand to create the business brand. And so I've done that with a couple of companies too. And they don't even want to be the face of the business. So they don't want anything to do with that,
Yeah.
being an influencer at any stage. So there's all different ways to structure it once you figure out, again, it goes back to the purpose. It goes back to what that product service is. Typically, when somebody crosses my desk, they already know what the service and the product is that they want to provide. That's what most people spend their entire lives trying to figure out. It's the other things that go along with it, like the image and the narrative, right?
Yeah.
So
like recently, the way that question kind of came to mind was I've been interacting with people that started out and the business and the personal brand were like one and the same, right? They're a service provider, they're out there doing it, they're supporting whoever it is that they're supporting. And then they're growing and scaling the business to a point where they're like, okay, I need to think about exit plan. And, how do I get the business to the point where it doesn't have to necessarily rely upon my face to sell, and it needs to stand on its own 2 feet to continue to grow? Because if I want to sell the company, I would assume somebody coming in evaluating it would go, okay, how many times is your face all over it? And if your face is not there anymore, that makes it so you don't have as many leads coming in, so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's when it's a good time to reevaluate the brand and to get in there. And so I always say, if there's a big shift internally or externally, you should go through a rebranding process. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to rebrand, right? But you need to go through that audit process so that you understand what needs to change at that point. And sometimes it may just be image, sometimes it may be, and maybe it's just 1 or 2 pillar shifts, right? Or maybe it's just a voice tone shift. But if you go through that audit regularly, especially when something big happens, like a lot of companies made bad choices when COVID happened. They made a lot of bad choices trying to stay afloat, but they were off brand, which killed them, right? So it can happen externally and it also can happen internally. And so you just need to learn the process so that you can be prepared for whatever comes at you.
Yeah. If we could switch gears a little bit, and talk about standing out in the marketplace and how to have a competitive differentiation. How would you like support somebody, or what do they need to look at or think about when they're trying to stand apart from their competitors?
So the first thing I always say is that the superstars are your competitors, right? So you're not necessarily looking at the other people at your same level. You are looking at the people that have done it well, hitting the same target audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a similar target audience. The next thing I would say is do not get too wrapped up in what the competition is doing, because you don't actually know what is going on behind closed doors. You don't actually know what's happening, right? So all it does is get in your way. But what we do for market research is I like to say we glance at the competition and we see what they look like, what our perception as a consumer is of that brand, right? What is this brand saying to this target audience? And then what we do is we look at what our brand pillars are and we say, what can we lean into that's already here? What can we lean into? Not create, not add, not change, but lean into that will, in competitive situations, say something different, right? So that's kind of our method. And so we do, and like our brand report for our clients, we go through all the competitive research. And then at the end, we do say, here's some differentiating messages that you can use, but still stay on brand.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
The first thing people want to do is add or change based off of what the competition is doing.
yeah.
99.9% of the time, not what you should be doing.
I mean, you and I both see behind the scenes of
Yeah.
companies and their businesses and what actually is
Yeah.
happening. And so, yes,
Yeah.
you don't know what's going on behind
You
the scenes,
don't know what's
without a
going on
doubt.
behind the scenes, and honestly, you can't make the same decisions, because what are you going to do? Are you going to go for the same stage that they were on? Are you
Right.
going to go for the same topic that they're doing? No, you have to figure out how to do it on your own. So you just are trying to figure out, okay, what can I lean into and how can I make it just a little bit different to what they're
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah. I'm curious, have you guys leaned into anything with AI and supporting the AI space, or jumping into it, or using it to support your clients in any way?
So I'm a fan of AI, but I'm also not a fan of AI. So, it's a love-hate relationship. I think that it does make things like market research a little easier. But I will say that there's so many copyright issues and just legal issues, with NDAs and things like that. You don't know how the information is being used or stored or whatever. You
Mhm.
also, like, we would never take any brand elements from AI. Like, we would never have something created in AI. I'm for a brand, right? For the foundation of the house. But I'm not opposed to it with like social media or things like that. And again, it has to be on brand, right? If there's a brand that's like, I don't know, rustic and grounded, like it doesn't necessarily make sense to use like a slick, clear AI picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, it has to make sense.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating.
And I say the same thing too with social media. Like people always ask me, what social media platform should I be on? Well, yes, they all speak to different audiences, and yes, each one demands a different style of communication, but your brand should dictate what that looks like. You don't have to be on all of them, right? As the marketing person, you want to be everywhere, right? You want to be getting as many impressions as possible. But in my branding side, I'm going to say, no, you need to only be in the places that make sense for your brand.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming and enlightening us on the brand side of things, Laura. What is the best way that people can connect with you? And do you happen to have a gift for our audience today?
I have two gifts for your audience today because I am awesome. So if you go to www.thebrandmanagement, so it's MGMT, so thebrandmgmt.com, there is a free download of the first chapter of the book, and from individual to empire. And then there is also a brand checklist where we kind of put together this just a one sheet that of steps that we take our clients through just to check off. Hey, do we have this? Do we have this? Hey, we haven't thought about this yet. Like maybe we should look at that, and that seems to be super helpful for a lot of people.
Perfect. My last question for you is, what is a takeaway or memorable note you'd like to leave our audience with?
Okay, so I love this. What I always tell people is marketing is what you want to say for the next 20 days, and branding is what you want to say for the next 20 years. So make sure you have your branding. Your branding is the foundation. That will determine all the different marketing fun that you can have, because that will open up the infinite ideas and possibilities from a marketing standpoint. Do I hit this segment of my target audience? How do I talk to this segment of the target audience? And how do I communicate it, and where should I communicate? Does this partnership make sense? Everything on the marketing side is changeable and workable, and you can experiment all over the place, but the branding should be consistent and clear and concise and have an emotional connection with your audience. So
beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate it, Laura. Thank you for joining us. And I want to thank our audience for also joining us on another episode of Creating Powerful Impact. I'm excited for you to take all of these branding lessons and these resources that you've learned here today. Go get the checklist so that you can start implementing them and creating even more impact in your world. Until next time, have an outstanding rest of your day. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Creating Powerful Impact podcast. If you are a successful coach, speaker, author, or thought leader who would like to be on this program, simply visit creatingpowerfulimpact.com/guest. If you are someone who got something out of this interview, would you please do me a favor and share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on your socials. Also, if you know somebody that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Creating Powerful Impact. I love seeing all of your posts and great guest selections. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and they really mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more about us? Head on over to our website, graceandeaseproductions.com, or follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Just look for Grace and Ease Productions on your favorite platform. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.